Okay, go ahead. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
And then there was one case from last week that we haven't gone through. Maybe too easy, and that's why I put another one that is also easy. So maybe we'll see how we go. Okay, so let me go back and so give you the history. Here, so the one from last week is K87. It's a 6-year-old Westie, drooling, gagging with regurgitation. And let me, these are the images. I will open the images, but let me share this with you. So, okay, so we copy that, and then we go into the tools chat. No, should be somewhere at chat. Okay. So you got the images. I'm going to open images in the screen so you can look at my screen. To be case 87 is Westie that is gagging or regurgitating. Okay, 2 images. So take a look. And then I have my paper as usual. And then we go through all the findings, and then we see if we agree, and then we try to explain the findings.
The trachea is dorsally displaced on the lateral.
Okay, good.
There's increased radial density in the dorsocaudal thorax on the lateral as well.
Okay. So, okay, yeah, I leave it there.
It's quite central, like on the VG, it's central. So I guess either esophagus or it's probably maybe a bit too dorsal for the accessory lung lobe.
Okay.
Maybe esophagus. So esophagus.
Midline in the DV. Okay. So maybe you can, I mean, I can see, but I'm not sure everyone can see. Do you mind showing us or pointing to?
So I guess the main bit would be there. But you can kind of argue maybe all of this is abnormal.
Okay.
With like a gas bubble in the middle. I don't know, but particularly in that, yeah.
I was going to say, in that same area, are they potentially like rugal folds in that sort of, it almost looks like stomach? So it's a gastroesophageal intussusception or something like that.
Cool. So before we move into that, Lucy, do you mind showing us where you see that same structure in the air projection? Just to be all on the I very much
probably
celebrate.
sort of, I guess here.
Okay, good.
Does that seem
So
right? Yeah.
it's a
Central,
thing.
isn't
It's a lot easier to see it in the lateral projection, and then once you see something like that in the lateral projection, then I think you need to force yourself to see where you, if you are able, and then where is it in the air projection. I think that helps a lot to then start trying to figure out what's that structure actually. Okay, good point. So in terms of, then there was a comment about, can there be rugal fold? So now we are going more, so if we come back to the boring situation of having to describe something, it's size, shape. So we can measure, we can try to give it a shape. I think it's a good thing to force yourself to go through that, because one of the things that now we are trying to figure is, is the opacity, what's the shape, in that I would include, can we see rugal folds? Is there anything that can guide us in terms of trying to figure out what that is? So we know the opacity, we know the location. Now we are happy there is the caudodorsal. Just it's extremely simple, but I'm gonna make the point, the thinking aloud point. If you see something like this here, it can be anywhere in the dog, from outside the dog, on the skin, in the lung, in the mediastinum, the other lung, the other wall. Make sense? So based on this, you can make that call. And then if you come back to the air projection, I think you need to go the same way. You need to say, well, do I see something outside? Do I see something in the lung? And then there seems to be what I would probably call like a widening of the caudal mediastinum, that it shouldn't be that wide. And more importantly, it's easier to allow something in the lung here. So nothing in the lung, nothing in the wall. So then we triangulate, we specially put that into that mediastinum. So that in terms of location. So in terms of opacity, we said there's soft tissue. I would probably include that there are some kind of lines there. It's hard to know where they belong, if they are superimposed or not. And then there is the comment, can there be rugal folds? That's a good call. Good call or good idea. And we leave it there. So anything else? Any other abnormality? Okay, so I would probably make one. So I would invite anyone to put the things together. So both of the comments that we had, one was the dorsal displacement of the trachea, and then the other one is some soft tissue opaque, but we can probably make it like mixed opacity. The other thing that I thought I never mentioned is, I think in this case is worth mentioning the word focal, because it implies the focal compared to diffuse. We are already categorizing something in different groups. So there's a focal structure with mixed opacity in the caudodorsal mediastinum. So how can we put those two together? So they are both in the mediastinum. Is it one creating the other one? Is there any way to put them together in there or theoretically? Do you expect if you see one to see the other one? I don't know. The more things that we can put in one story, the better we can make a story that explains everything we see. It's kind of a better fit. So in other words, how can you explain, is there any way to explain both findings?
Is it possible that you've got an esophageal foreign body, and then you've got gas in front of the esophageal foreign body, And I'm not quite sure I can explain why the trachea is displaced though, unless there's something pathology higher up that's lifting that trachea. I don't think there's anything underneath it. I think it's lifting. I can't see it, the trachea clearly in the VD view, so I can't see which way it's gone.
So I think main bronchi here, caudal left, right, and I will put it here, somewhere there. And based on that, maybe this is the left lateral contour, somewhere there, and this is the right lateral contour, somewhere there.
Okay.
Which is slightly to the right, which is where it should be. And that was kind of missing, where pointing out the meaning that you talk about the trachea is that the meaning that you need to force yourself in the same way that we've done with this, trying to figure where is in the other projection. That's also should be a reflex, you know. So you talk about the trachea here, then you should come to here, say, you know, is it okay? Is it not only dorsally but also laterally displaced? I mean, again, every displacement, try to put it in the two projections because it gives more information. So indeed, so out of that story that you are putting in front, you are saying, well, there is something in the esophagus, there is something here that is blocking. That's why there is accumulation of gas. If you go through the book, I mean, in theory, the trachea should be ventrally displaced, not dorsally displaced. Makes sense? So because anatomically, the esophagus is dorsal to the trachea. So anytime you have something in the esophagus, the trachea is going to be ventrally displaced. So what I think is happening in this particular case, I think it's not, this is a good example. It's not breaking the rule in the book. Is that actually more than saying that the trachea is dorsally elevated here, I think I would argue the opposite. I would say the trachea is ventrally displaced here. Makes sense? It's the same thing depending on how you look at it, and probably both are true. So I think what is happening here is this being displaced ventrally at this point, and I think that kind of results in this looking like it's dorsally displaced, but it's probably more normal. And remember that the trachea can have that kinking or flexure or mild dorsal deviation. One of the most common reasons for that is flexion of the head. So when you are taking the radiograph of a dog thorax, the neck should be extended, not completely extended like this, like crazy in a natural position, but also the head is an important point. If you flex the head, then the trachea has to go somewhere. Makes sense? So it's not something that you can stretch or make it smaller. So then it results in that curvature. So coming back, I would rephrase the change in the trachea and say that, yeah, there may be some elevation there, but I think the most important because it can help us explain, or we can put it together. If this is in the esophagus, this is likely resulting. Gravity is they are both things in the same anatomical location. If one gets big, it's going to affect the other one. And we always expect ventral displacement of the trachea. And I think this is the case in this case. So now we kind of, everything fits. That's a very simple thinking, but the idea of these rounds is to go deep into not to assume that everything is clear and then we know about it, just to make it very visible. So or now, if you don't have any other finding, something that I would probably stress if I'm writing the report, you know, in theory you need to write everything, but we sometimes are strategic in what we describe or what we highlight. In this case, in the same way that I said, you know, once you describe the trachea and the displacement of the trachea, in a case like this where you think that there is an esophageal disease, and even more if you put that together with the history, I think there has to be a reflex where you mention that the lung looks okay. Makes sense? Because this is the case where you need to make a call about is there aspiration pneumonia or not? Because everything is screaming, you know, is there aspiration pneumonia? So I think making that point, the lung has normal opacity, no air bronchograms, no areas of increased lung opacity with ventral distribution. I think that has to be mentioned in this case. So the next thing is what's the explanation? What are the possible differentials for that? So I don't think there is any question that we are dealing with an esophageal disease that fits with the clinical signs. So now the question is how far we can go in trying to decide which type of disease we are dealing with. And based on that, we should explore recommendations, what to do next.
Mariano, can you just tell me what the presenting signs were? I didn't get the.
Oh, so it was like, I think I made that up. It was like gagging and regurgitating.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you're left with the esophageal foreign body of soft tissue opacity, and esophageal mass,
Okay.
hiatal hernia. That's all I've got.
Cool. They all look like. I'm thinking, should we include anything else? And then I think we got a couple of
The gas in the fundus of the stomach on the lateral looks there, which makes me think maybe a hiatal hernia is less likely, but I don't know. I haven't seen enough hiatal hernias to know definitively.
Well, but that's exactly a very good point. Is force yourself to look at to see where the stomach is and look for indirect information. So sometimes it is a bit of the stomach going in, and then the stomach looks like normal. Sometimes it's all going into there. So to clarify, we have the. So if this is this would be an hiatal hernia, then we need the goal kind of is like part of the stomach. Now we went into the mediastinum, into the thorax. So then this kind of either here or here has to be the gastroesophageal sphincter. Makes sense? Which moved now into the thorax. So this will be part of the stomach. Then there is the other differential where you have a paraesophageal. So in that case, the esophagus is still coming through the sphincter, but then the stomach is herniating next to the esophagus. And then all of those are possible differentials. And I guess we need to. So how would you discover? How would you rule in and out those differentials? So we got the hernia, the true hernia. We didn't say a gastroesophageal intussusception. That would be another differential. Usually is yep. Then it looks a lot larger, and the esophagus and dogs are usually in shock, like the gastroesophageal intussusception that no one mentioned, but it's a uncommon disease, and it's a lot more severe because now the esophagus is very extremely distant. It's a severe distension of the esophagus. So I would probably not even mention that one, but the hernias is a good one, and we have the proper hiatal hernia, and then we have the paraesophageal hernia. Then we got the foreign body, and then we got an esophageal mass. So what to do next to learn more?
And I guess we could put out there something weird, excuse me, like a granuloma, like a Spirocerca lupi. Not in Australia, maybe, but in honkers we had some.
Cool, yes, I lived in the Caribbean, and then we got those cases. And interestingly, and I probably need to review more of the literature, every case that I've seen, and actually it was a very, very common situation, they were paraesophageal. So they weren't actually in the esophagus, but they were in the mediastinum. So the parasite will kind of go through the esophagus and then form a granuloma. And then I remember even then the medicine people scoping these dogs. And then if you scope these dogs, I'm sure you know about this. It's not that you find an intraluminal or even a luminal mass. You find a paraesophageal. So it's something next to the esophagus. And then there is a communication. You can see. I think you can even sometimes see the parasite.
Sometimes you can see the parasite, yeah.
So I remember being involved with those. But based on location, yes, that's a differential. I guess it's slightly different. What I remember is that they were a bit more dorsal, again, because they were parasagittal, paraesophageal. But again, good differential. I remember having a case in a puppy that actually presented because of HO. So it presented with swelling of the limbs, it was lame, and then actually it was the dog had spirocerca, and then it had HO, and then we removed someone treated the granuloma, and then the HO came regress or recover, and then it was a happy puppy. So that was a very, very interesting sequence, because again, I was also breaking the rule that HO only happens in older dogs. Makes sense? So it's not necessarily like this. It's more common in older dogs because it's more common for older dogs to have a space-occupying lesion in the thorax. But if you get a puppy with a space-occupying lesion in the thorax, you get HO anyway. So that I remember that case because it was a teaching case, like I want to remember. Okay, so what to do next to figure out what is happening in this case? Or to differentiate the differentials?
I'd probably recommend endoscopy.
Yeah,
I
with
think
lethargy.
nowadays that's the way to go. Absolutely, yeah. In theory, you can give contrast and then try to figure between those differentials. Only thing that I will mention in that case is I will probably give iodinated contrast in this case, because I think the likelihood of regurgitating that contrast and then aspirating the contrast is high. Also, it doesn't look like, but if there is a lesion in the esophagus there, is there any leakage into the mediastinum? I mean, you don't want to give barium in that case.
The thing that's thrown me is like the esophageal thrombodes I've seen generally, they've had pretty diffuse megaesophagus secondary to it, and it just seems very localized. Just makes me wonder whether it's more chronic, like where it's kind of been a gradual progression. I don't know.
I don't know if what I'm gonna say is correct, so don't take my word for it. Please question what I'm gonna say. I think the more chronic the obstruction, the more likely is that there is a diffuse dilation of the esophagus.
Yeah, true.
In the beginning, it's like, and I probably am taking that from the abdomen, mechanical ileus in the small bowel. So in the early stage, there is and if you are ultrasounding a case like that, then you see that the GI is really trying to push that foreign body. So then usually increase peristalsis. And I think that is the reasoning behind. Some people argue that when there is an obstruction, then usually there is no feces in the colon. They try to make this association, and I think it works most of the time. I don't think it works. I don't think it's very specific. That's why I don't like to use it. But I think the underlying idea is you have an obstruction. Now the reaction, the local reflex at that area of the GI tract is trying to push it. So you increase the motility and increase the peristalsis. And then if you do that, then you also increase the peristalsis in the colon. And then you empty everything as much as you can, basically, except for where you cannot empty. And then that looks easy. If you wait long enough, then I think you get to a point where you can turn that mechanical ileus into paralytic ileus. And I guess it's because of the electrolyte imbalances, and I don't know if there is some fatigue of that muscle, trying to push the content. I'm not sure about this. This is what I use in my mind to explain it. So in this particular case, I think what we are looking at here is kind of a wave of peristalsis that is trying to push the content. And I haven't said so, and this is very thin, but more than rugal folds, which I love the idea and try to find that, because that's a detail that can make a big difference. I think there are actually mineral opaque foreign bodies here. So for example, this has a similar opacity compared to the rib. And then probably there's another one there, and probably there's another one there. Again, this is going very thin, but yes, I will probably run that way and say the opacity of whatever is in here is not purely soft tissue. I think there is a mix of soft tissue gas but also some mineral. And then that, I think, makes a foreign body like way, way higher in the list. But again, we are now going thin.
You know what it was?
Yeah, bones.
It was a
Yeah.
bone.
Yeah, bones and Westies, they always, that was kind of a giveaway, my history. I think it was a piece of bone with meat with bones, and like all got stuck in there. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is where we expect foreign bodies to get stuck. And I guess that is a theoretical knowledge that can help us build our certainty about something being a foreign body or not. Like if you give me something that is probably sitting here, I will probably not think about a foreign body. Foreign bodies, there are 3 stations. One is the thoracic inlet, so they can get stuck there. The other one is the heart base, so it can get stuck here. And the other one is immediately, cranial to the diaphragm before going into the stomach. So these are the 3 stations. Anything that is not in any of those 3 places, and it still is in the mediastinum, is where it's in the esophagus, then don't be so certain, because it really works. That they usually get stuck in those places. Another just to make all the thinking, unpacking all the thinking. Is there anyone bothered by, because if I need to outline what I think is abnormal, I'll probably outline and go something like this, and then come like here. Is there anyone bothered by that? Bothered by my ability to draw something that comes like this, and it goes, let's say, across the diaphragm, and then it comes like this. The word across is wrong, but that's exactly a point. How can you explain that this is still in the esophagus when it's going across that line of the diaphragm? Now I'm trying to switch the thing. I'm asking a question to see if anyone can explain that, and I'm using a word that is purposely trying to confuse you. Okay.
But you're only crossing one crura of the diaphragm, not both.
Okay.
Right.
That means that it's not actually crossing.
Yeah, because the esophagus goes into the right side of the diaphragm. So
Left.
Left side of the diaphragm. So because it's a right lateral, the right side's pushed forward, but the actual entrance is further back.
And the other thing is also remember that, so I think the situation gets more clear here. So remember that the esophagus goes into the stomach, not at the most cranial aspect of the duodenum, of the diaphragm, but at the more on the midline. So it's somewhere here. So then there is a lot of grooves that should be, even this could be the left, because this is a more lateral structure. Makes sense? So if I need to draw in here, and a VD projection would show this a lot nicer, but this is a DB projection. That's why we don't have that. But what you need to know or assume is that the ventral aspect of the diaphragm is there, but the dorsal aspect of the diaphragm is more like this. Okay? So then actually there's a place where the esophagus superimposes over the crus, both. Makes sense? So then this can, because I like the point about, well, it could be that it's going across one, and that in that case that should be the right. Makes sense? But this is not the case, because this is the fundus of the stomach, and then this is the crus. So then this has to be left. This has to be left. So if that is left, how can it be that, and the esophagus is going on the left, how is it be that we can still get this here and then that line there? And the answer is that one thing, which is the crus, is more lateral, the esophagus is more in the midline. So there is no going through, they are being superimposed. In other words, another way to look at this, the esophagus is going into the stomach at this point, not at this point. Make sense? It's going at this point. So then if that is true, then what we are seeing is the superimposition of this part of the esophagus with this part of the diaphragm, or actually with this part of the diaphragm. Make sense? Hopefully I'm not getting it too, again, I'm purposely trying to find problems, make sense? And if you haven't seen the problems, I make the problems. So then we think about them, because this knowledge is going to become very useful for another case. Makes sense? Is how to deconstruct the image, how to explain the lines. So I don't know if I was clear enough, but I think it's
That's
something.
good. That's very good. Very good.
Okay, good. Okay, so we can erase all of the region of interest. Okay, and then that's it with this case. And then I have one. Do you have any questions? I knew they would be short. It's a classic one. Yeah, so that's good. And I hope I'm not forgetting to mention anything. So the next one. Okay. Let me. Okay. Again, it's a classic and a short one. It's especially dedicated to one of you. I'm not going to say who. So it's a whatever adult flat-coated retriever, lethargy and inappetence. I'm going to share this 88. So this is the case. I'm going to share on the chat, just in case you want to open images. And now, okay, good. Images. Normal or abnormal?
Abnormal.
Okay, good.
One thing that jumps out and is in the area of the spleen, there's a round area of increased soft tissue opacity.
Good.
Which I can draw when I grab my thingy. So on the lateral, it's in that area, and on the DV, it's here. So that's, I think, in the area of where the spleen is, probably more the tail. So I'm not sure whether it's just kind of superimposing on itself by folding, but it just seems so round that I would argue that it's not. It's something else.
Okay, then we can go. So I see what you mean. I completely agree. Your description of the location, which I will go mid-ventral abdomen to the left of the midline. Makes sense? So it's in the ventral. So 3 coordinates is in the middle of the abdomen. It's not cranial abdomen. It's not caudal abdomen. It's ventral, but it's also on the left. So that would be how I would describe. I completely agree. And then we go, and I agree that the spleen is there. But then we need to, then I think there is more to the justification about what it may be. I completely agree that the spleen is the candidate number 1, but then we need to open that box and really go in depth about, why.
Yeah. The other thing as well is, so you can quite clearly see the small intestinal gas, which especially on the lateral, it's kind of more caudally or mid-abdomen bunched, displaced. And on the DV, again, it's kind of more displaced to the right. So it looks like there's a bit of a mass effect where that soft tissue opacity doesn't appear to have any kind of superimposition of gas over it. I said it's in the area of the spleen, but I guess it also could not be spleen because there's like mesentery within that area as well. So it could be, anything involving those structures too.
What you just described, so it's perfect. So then basically the way we deal with that is that when we see a mass and we can draw a line around it, like in this particular case, then we call that a mass. And then the other thing that is next to that is to describe, and this is kind of a supportive situation, is there any mass effect? Is that displacing stuff? And that's basically what you've done. So there is mass effect. And the best thing to assess mass effect in the abdomen is the small bowel. So the small bowel is usually acting like sometimes we study it on itself. Makes sense if it's a vomiting dog, is in a foreign body, is distended. But sometimes it's giving us hints about other things, things that are next to the bowel. And then it's very useful to detect this mass effect. Perfect. In this case, I want to just highlight again, and it's a repetition, a teaching point. Be aware that everything that has gas, we always use as a telltale, as a something giving us information about displacement. We use that in the thorax and we use the trachea. Makes sense? So, and why? Because it's easy to see. We come back to the principles, gas field structures, easy to see. We just grab them and we know where they should be. And if they're not there, then we read that displacement. Again, it's a very, very, very basic principle. Today, we use it twice. We use it for the trachea and now we're using it for the small bowel. It's a big principle.
The other thing I note is the small intestine, the duodenum presumably is very much far forward there than I would have expected to see it. And yeah, to match it up there, it doesn't look quite so bad there.
So the duodenum and that gastroduodenal sphincter, that area is annoyingly cranial, I would say a bit dorsal and to the right. And that, if you are doing ultrasound and sometimes someone says, can you please rule out a foreign body in the pylorus? You roll your eyes and say, well, I'll do my best, but you know that, if you want to image that area, it's quite hard because it's so dorsal. Sometimes it's against the diaphragm. So anatomically, it's a bit like this. In this particular case, and then it's worse if someone asks you to do that ultrasonographically, you are begging that is a dog with a round chest, and even more, you really want a dog to have hepatomegaly. So in that situation, a dog with a rounded thorax with hepatomegaly, the stomach is displaced more caudally, and then you can get to see that area. In a deep-chested dog that is thin and has small liver, that area is really, really cranial and dorsal, and then it's very hard to image. So I think in this particular case, it's calling your attention because it's gas filled, and I would explain that by making the point that this is a left lateral projection. So remember that in a left lateral projection, the gas that is in the stomach is going to be in the pylorus. So this part is on the upper side of the dog, and then it's going to be very easy for that gas to go into the small bowel. And then there is even a paper where they've taken dogs, and then they decided to take a bunch of them, first the right and then the left, I think, and then a bunch of them first the left and then the right lateral recumbency. And then they can prove that, I don't know what's their call, but basically they can prove that anytime the left lateral projections, the small bowel has a lot more gas in the left lateral projections. And it's just because you are flipping the dog, and then you are moving that gastric gas into the duodenum and small bowel. And I think there is a recommendation about what to do first. I think they said do the right lateral recumbency first and do the left lateral recumbency second. But I'll try to find the paper, and then we should go through that. I love those papers because they are very easy. I'm always jealous about people that have those ideas. They're easy to do in the clinic, and they are remarkable in how clinically relevant they are. I mean, that piece of information is very cool to have. So yeah, I'll promise I'll bring that paper. But coming back to your point, I think this is all due to positioning. I think that's all gas in the esophagus, in the duodenum. I think that has to do with the positioning of the dog. Not that concerned. And the other point probably is that we are cutting so we don't know actually how far the liver goes and the duodenum goes. So that may give you the false impression that we are dealing with without being too cranial. I suppose the diaphragm comes like this, and it goes probably to this point, somewhere like here. So we are cutting a lot of that abdomen. Sorry about that. So technically, it's not the best image.
To me, the gastric axis is rotated on the lateral, rotated anti-clockwise, which would suggest the liver might be enlarged, but obviously we can't see the front of the abdomen, which limits.
So remember, remember that the gastric axis is not the gas. So what we are seeing here is the pylorus.
Oh, right, okay.
So there has to be the
because it's a left lateral, isn't it? Not a right.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's why it's always so good to have both projections.
Right.
This is a clear example. I'm trying to see what should I use to draw. But yes, so this is the pylorus. The fundus should be somewhere there. So if you, for the axis, you need to do something like this, I would say.
Yeah.
Rather than
which
this.
is normal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, well, we want it to be parallel to the ribs or perpendicular to the spine. So it's borderline. Yeah.
It's a deep-chested dog, though, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So then, good point.
Yeah.
Then we need to be, more careful about that.
Also, just on the lateral, right at the corner, the little bit of lung you see, doesn't look normal. But because it's right on the edge, and it's right on the edge of the lung fields, I don't know the significance of that. You need you need proper X-rays, but it just doesn't looks a bit patchy.
Excellent. That was the whole point of this case, and it was to the people that look in the periphery. It was to celebrate people looking in the periphery. So that was the easy bit to find. That I agree, it looks like a splenic mass. The only thing that I would probably add to your description is it seems to be poor detail in some areas. And these kind of undulating contours, probably we can't see the point of the bladder. So if you put these together with that, I think this is not only a splenic mass, but it's likely bleeding, or there's some association, some bleeding or this neoplastic effusion. But I think there is some fluid in the abdomen. So that would be the only thing that I would add to your description. In terms of what it could be, one other argument why this is very likely to be spleen is because we don't see the normal spleen. That's probably a part of the spleen, but for example, here we don't see the normal spleen. So if you want to blame a structure and you see normal, then it's harder. If you want to blame a structure and you don't see it where it should be and the shape where it should, so then that adds in your confidence to say that's a spleen. I think differentials are something in the small bowel that is not obstructing, something in the peritoneum. Those are differentials a lot less likely. But the whole point of the study, of giving you this case, is we've been having cases lately where some of you were pointing to things in the periphery, and I thought it was a good case, or a case to reward those that look not only in the center, but you go a bit to the periphery. So I think you should be completely confident about those. Those look like nodules, and then everything fits together. It makes sense that the way that will probably would be ideal to go about this case is if you think about that and you have in mind the possibility of the splenic mass. Actually, you should be guiding your eyes into whatever happened in the lung, because you know that lungs are possible, meds are possible. So this is the lung radiograph. But everything was already there. I mean, that you are getting a bit of lung doesn't make it any less reliable. Makes sense? So if you discuss about those nodules, there is no option other than them being in the lung. They can be in the liver. Makes sense? So if you have nodules in the liver, you won't be able to see them. They're silhouetting. It's like grapes surrounded by water. So if you see those nodules and you see them in both projections, then that's it, you know. But you know, I know you need to document them. You need to come and take the radiograph. But yeah, it was to give the opportunity to those that look in the periphery to excel.
I don't know why anybody buys flat-coated retrievers. The chance of having one with some nasty disease would be have to be in the 90%, I think.
Okay, so there were two short cases, classics. I remember playing with this case with the students a lot, just to teach them the lesson of, you know, looking at in the periphery.
Did you deliberately cut the front of the X-rays off? Was that how they came?
You can go back to the video, and you will see that I made sure that I left the border there.
Yeah.
I was giving you the whole image purposely.
I was wondering whether they'd had the whole diaphragm on and you took a bit off to make it harder.
No. This is. But I didn't want to give you the other image. I think they haven't repeated the case because
it's a good example of why you always need the diaphragm on there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like radiographic quality is a very important point. You know, it makes a huge difference. I would probably not let go unless there is a clear reason. But it's just one thing that it has such a strong impact in your ability to make calls. People that just say, like, I don't know if this is not straight, but it has such a strong impact in our confidence and in our ability to make calls, the radiographic quality, that if you understand that, you will not let go of something like this, for example. As a rule, you know, you just don't, you do it again. You are there, you have the dog there, it's the important thing.
I think sort of along the same lines from the last case is like always x-raying the chest, like at least doing one lateral and the vomiting dogs, because you only need to miss one esophageal foreign body in your life to never do it again. Good point. Catastrophic.
So we come back, do you remember our discussion about the stomach? So now in here, the stomach doesn't look that abnormal. Make sense? That's not too bad. And there's a lot of liver that we miss here. Okay, enough for today.
Cool. Thanks, Mariano. That was awesome.
Mariano, thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. That was very good.
Thanks.
Cool. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But,
Mariano, just before you go, can you hear me? I didn't get, I mean, I can always check. So I didn't get any links this week. I don't know whether anybody else did either, but I guess I'll just assume that you're just doing the next ones. So I've got access to the, I don't know what you call it, the website where you've got all the numbers. I've got access to that, but I just didn't get the links this week. That's all I was going to say.
What do you mean? Like an email with the links or the links?
Yeah, every week on a Monday, I get an email, usually get 2 emails with the case number and the presenting signs.
Okay.
And I didn't get that this week, so I wasn't sure it was on, so I just logged in. I was a bit late.
I would check the junk mail, because that happens whenever when I go and I get a topic, and I include one, like I make a new topic. So in this week, you should have received about case 88, not 87, because I've done this 2 weeks ago and then was kind of waiting there. But anytime I create a new case, and every time I put this information or the link, then it sends an email, and it did send to me. So if I show you my email, it sent the email to me. So I would check the junk mail.
Whoever's still there, I wonder who else got it or not. Yeah.
See, I got, and because I have 2 accounts, I have an account as a host and an account as a user. So this sent me, this kind of worked. And is this information? This is the dog, and then the next one is going to be the link to the images.
Yeah,
so I
that's
wonder, yeah. So I wonder if the emails are going to your junk mail.
okay. I'll check. I'll check.
Yeah, I
check
got
that.
the email this week, so maybe check your junk mail, Jill.
Yeah, maybe it was. I will.
Me
I will.
too.
check.
I received it. Yeah.
Sorry
Okay.
that I do it late. I usually do it just the last thing on Monday, but yeah. So you don't have a lot of time, but yeah.
So you'll be there in 2 weeks anyway.